I'm going to start with a very high-profile one. I learned about the Sharon Tate's murder when I was like really, really young. And it was the most gruesome, morbid thing I had ever heard of because, it's awful. People are still fascinated by it. And then later in life, I learned that there was hauntings surrounded it. So I really wanted to delve into that, and I'm glad I did because it's very interesting. It doesn't only start with Sharon Tate. It goes back some years before that with Jean Harlow. It's actually where it starts. So I'm going to give you a couple addresses, let you think about it. We have Paul Bern's house, 9820 Easton Drive, LA, California, 90210. It starts here at Paul Bern's house. He is a MGM film executive. He marries Jean Harlow, who's a young, beautiful actress at the time. She is the latest sex pot on the scene. She's very beautiful. She's blonde. She just shows off her cleavage to everybody. They get married when she's really young. He's 26 years older than her. He's considerably older. She's smitten with him, and he has been described a lot as just being indifferent towards her. Bern didn't seem quite as happy as Harlow, and as the time went by, he became even less happy with the situation. He bought this house for her, which is on Easton Drive in the Hollywood Hills, and Harlow hated it and decided to sell it, but he put his foot down, claiming the house was where he wanted them to grow old together, which is weird because he really
he had already done that.
Anyways, let's get to the good stuff. Can we get to the good stuff, please?
Finally.
He kills himself in that house. He asked her to leave for the night. They had been fighting a lot, and there's a lot of different reports about why they fight. Some people think that he was having an affair. Other people think that it was because he was impotent, which he was telling everybody. There are some claims that he was gay.
Is he telling everybody
He told everybody, listen to this. And his death is a mystery, too. They find his dead body, and supposedly, I don't know how they figured this out, because it seemed to have been a snuffed up crime scene. I'll explain that in a bit. But he is just completely naked, and he smells of her fragrance, and there's just her stuff is everywhere. So a lot of people thought that she murdered him. A lot of people years later who would do biographies on Jean Harlow think that she knows who did it, but she didn't murder him. Not enough material for me. You don't pay me enough to do the research for this. The butler finds him dead. Before Butler calls the cops, the butler calls two film producers, Louis Mayer and Irving Thalberg, and they come over and they rush over to the scene, and they're there for 2 hours before they call the cops. And Bird had, supposedly written a suicide note, and Mayer had stolen it and then returned it later. And the note's really funny, and it seems like it's something. I've read suicide notes before. I read yours all the time. This one does not seem like one. It seems very whimsical to me, and I'll read it to you right now. Dear, unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you and wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you, Paul. You understand? Last night was only a comedy. Very strange now, don't you think? Now, they read this note to Jean Harlow, and she's not much help with it. She doesn't really get it. And if she does get it, it's very cryptic. If she does get it, she never tells anybody what it means. So there's this inside mystery to this. A lot of people think that he was murdered. I guess the film studios were trying to snuff up a scandal. Any evidence that might have leaned towards a certain direction has been pretty much wiped out by these two film producers. So after that, people move in that house after this suicide. You can't see me do quotations. I'm doing air quotations. Suicide happens. People claim to see Paul Bern in the house. People neighboring the house and who live there claim to see a blonde woman who looks a little bit like Jean Harlow standing on the patio looking out. Oh, I forgot to mention. She dies very young, too. Nothing suspicious. She has liver failure, but she's really young at the time when she dies. They claim to see Jean Harlow's ghost there. They hear voices. And some people claim to see Paul Bern. This will come back to you in just a minute. There's been a couple other deaths on the property, too. A man hung himself there. Another person has drowned in the pool. Let's skip over to the 60s now. Jay Sebring moves in here. Jay Sebring is the hairstylist to the stars. He is supposedly the basis for Warren Beatty's character in Shampoo. He's a very fanciful character. He moves in here. He's dating Sharon Tate at the time, who is a model barely turning into an actress. This is years before she meets Roman Polanski. She's staying over there. He leaves town, so she's there alone. She's sleeping in a bedroom by herself. Some people will call it a haunting. What it really was, called by a lot of people, is called a premonition, which to me is even scarier. So she's sleeping alone in the bedroom, and according to her, the door opens, and what is described as a little man comes in. She learns later it looks like Paul Bern, and supposedly the ghost of Paul Bern comes in, and he starts shuffling around the room. So she gets up and decides. He loved to shuffle. He loved to shuffle.
That's how you knew it was Paul Bern's.
So she describes it as a short and somewhat angry man, which is how Jean Harlow would be able to describe him as well. So she goes downstairs to have a drink, and then she sees something even worse, which is an apparition of someone who's bloodied all over, tied to a post of the stairs, the handrails of the stairs with rope, and she says it looks like Jay Sebring. So she, another...
Did she go up to it and say that to it?
Are you Jay Sebring? She is obviously goes back upstairs. Her nerves are shaking. I don't know why she didn't run out. Which this is the part of the story.
This is what I don't understand about this story. When you see something like that, you don't live in the city. You leave the city. You never come back.
She needed a drink for nerve-sitting purposes, and she didn't know where the bar was. And something told her about this bookcase. Inside, there was a hidden bar. She poured a shot. So that happens there. Now we skip back over. Years later, we go 1.5 miles south down Benedict Canyon to 10050 Cielo Drive, Los Angeles, California. This is the house where, infamously, she is murdered along with Jay Sebring, who is visiting her at the time, and Abigail Folger, who's an heir to the Folger's Coffee. And then a couple other people. One guy's name I can never pronounce, so I'm not going to try, and Stephen Parent.
Charles Manson.
If you don't know about the Manson killings, I don't know how you don't know about it. Charles Manson got a couple of people to co-visit this house where this, I forgot who was, a music producer used to live, but that music person wasn't there. The real reason, I mean, there's a lot of claims of what Helter Skelter was really about. When it came down to it really was, there was a member of the Manson family who was going around committing crimes very similar to these murders, where he was hacking people to death and writing on the walls. They wanted to show the cops that he was innocent by committing similar crimes. So like, oh, you see, people are getting like this, you let them go. So it just happened. So they decide to commit a crime in similar fashion to get their friend out of jail. This involves hacking 3 people to death. Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Monica Sabian, and the infamous, very scary Tex Watson go to the house and kill everybody. It's creepy and horrifying, but it's not haunted. A lot of people don't know this. They tie a noose around Sharon Tate, and there's a beam that's not connected to the ceiling. They loop that over, and then they tie it, I believe, to Abigail Folger. So it's like a tug of war. So if one runs away, the other one is pulled, and then it just gets stabbed. Sharon Tate gets stabbed 108 times. She had a baby at the time. She no longer had the baby after that. There's a lot of claims that the baby was pulled out of her body. I don't think that's true. But she dies there, obviously. Abigail Folger dies there. And then Jay Sebring is tied to the handrails, and he's stabbed to death and bloodied, much like the apparition that Sharon Tate had seen years before at Paul Bern's house up the street. So nobody wants to live there anymore, obviously. The neighbor, David Ullman, moves in, and he begins to hear screams coming from the place. He hears footsteps. There's a lot of like just spooky behavior after that, a lot of orbs and cold spots and stuff like that. I can't attest to that, obviously.
You've never been cold in your life.
What's this feeling people keep talking about? The neighbor has filmed a lot of stuff. He's currently doing a documentary called The House at the End of the Drive, I believe.
Last House on the Left? At the End of the Drive?
They're actually very similar, if you've seen Last House on the Left. Probably less pee.
No, same amount.
I'm peeing just talking about it.
We're all peeing.
But yeah, there's a lot of footage online of them going through Sharon Tate's old house, and there's a lot of what I describe as lint coming across the screen. They describe it as orbs. I don't know. Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails moved in years later, and he called it, I forgot what he called it, Pig Studios or something like that, because Death to Pigs is written on the walls in blood. There's not a lot of stories about his experiences, but you know, how could you live there and not feel like that gut feeling of people?
How could you live there?
How could you live there? How could you live there? Apparently, they knocked down the house. They like even moved the dirt, and they changed the address to like 10066 or something.
They moved it on top of an ancient native burial ground instead.
There's a picture online. Somebody took a picture there. They found the door. Like they moved the door to another house.
Jim Morrison.
Hate you so much. Can we one day talk about just how Janis Joplin smashed a glass against Jim Morrison's head? That could be an entire podcast episode. I can go on forever. I read this somewhere that Trent Reznor was at a market nearby, and Sharon Tate's sister came up to him, and she was just like, how can you live there? And he was trying to defend it, like, it's part of American folklore. And she was, my sister was killed there. Like, how do you, like, live there? That's Sharon Tate's story.